Well, hello everyone, and welcome back to another installment in our Reviewed and Ranked series. As we make our way down the base roster of the Ultimate Alliance cast, we find ourselves face to face with the high-flying Avenger Falcon. And boy, is this an interesting character to go over. So I hope that you're looking forward to this breakdown and analysis. If you are, please feel free to hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more daily content. And without further ado, let's jump into what Falcon has to offer. So first and foremost, we need to talk about his synergies. And Falcon has 5 synergies in particular. He has a resilience synergy with the crew. He has a defense synergy with generations. He has a vitality synergy with Ultimate Alliance 3 and 2 energy synergies in the form of Avengers and Partners. And those energy synergies are quite nice to have, especially as it allows you to rinse through and upkeep your ability and synergy attacks within the team that you have built out and selected. So not the greatest synergies, not the highest amount of synergies that we've seen, but certainly some synergies that can be worked with when it comes to building a team and making them fully functional. Let's now cross over and talk a little bit about the basic attacks and standard abilities that Falcon has in his kit. First off, we have his basic attack combo. This involves a series of 5 hits, 2 of which are executed one after the other if you're pressing the button individually. That would specifically be the second hit in his combo. So he has a 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And that last hit will send the characters flying backwards, and it provides some element of knockback. These hits also do have an element of hit stun to them for smaller grunt type characters, which will discourage being retaliated against immediately when unleashing those blows. The heavy attack that Falcon has at his disposal is interesting of sorts. It really only knocks people down if they're hit towards the end of the move. It has somewhere between 4 and 5 hits on it, as Falcon sends himself spinning forward in that general motion. But if they're large type characters, they will not take as much damage from that, as he's not stationary with his heavy attack as some of the other characters that we've looked at have been thus far. Not a bad heavy attack, all things considered, but it is something to keep in mind as you are running around and trying to deal some damage to the opponents in your way. We can now talk about his versatility in movement, and instead of a double jump, Falcon does possess a flight mechanic where he can fly around, and that just kind of makes sense because of the wings and rocket pack that he has at his disposal. Though, as a reminder, you do need to keep in mind that anytime you activate a flight ability, you will slowly consume the energy points that you have at your disposal, making it more of an issue for you to unleash your abilities if you are flying for an extended period of time. But these flight abilities are quite nice for getting over a lot of floor obstacles, especially those that are found within the Shadowland section of the game. The falling aerial attack is unique in its class based off of the things that we've looked at thus far. As Falcon comes out of a jump or out of a fly, or even some of his abilities will put him up in the air, you can hit the attack buttons to start up the falling aerial. It involves him pulling out 2 of his SMG machine guns and firing a flurry of shots as he slowly descends onto the ground. And this is an attack that you can influence as you are falling in the general direction, though it is important to note that whichever way you are holding the joystick to influence that movement is the area in which these bullets will be spread. They don't deal a whole lot of damage, they don't provide any knockback or significant knockback as being dealt. Honestly, their best utility is for slightly increasing your overall DPS as you're coming back down to the ground, as well as recuperating some of the energy points that have been expended especially if the attack that puts you up in the air is the one that you had just used. It'll be nice to be able to recuperate some of the energy points in order to rinse and repeat some of your other abilities or team synergy attacks. And before we get into the abilities that Falcon has, we do need to talk about his block and dodge. The blocking animation involves a shoulder down type deterrent with one of his wings coming out to cover the front portion of the character. This is a very unique blocking animation compared to all of the other ones that we've seen thus far. Then as you put in a directional influence, the character will perform that somersault forward or to the sides, depending on where the directional influence is coming from. So with Falcon's basic kit looked at, let's transition over and talk a little bit about the abilities that he has. First and foremost, we have the Red Wing Rush, which causes Falcon to rise up and then dive down, creating a shockwave when coming in contact with the ground. This has the melee attack type and the slam synergy trait caused by that large, impactful hit coming back down onto the ground. It will push some of the enemies back and can even knock down some of the larger enemies, provided that they are not a mini-boss character. This isn't the best attack to use in a synergy format because it has a relatively long startup, and if you're using your synergy, your team synergy attacks to try and stagger out some of the more difficult enemies and taking them down, you've got to time it very, very well, or be prepared of a potential stun extension, anticipating that before unleashing this attack. All things considered, it's not a terrible ability. It has a C class in the damage, an EP consumption of C as well, and finally having that C classification in the stagger. And consistent among all of Falcon's abilities, you will notice that as the ability is leveled up, there will be a reduced energy point cost, an increase to the attack damage and damage done to the stagger gauge, and finally a reduced chance of the attack being interrupted when used. The second ability that Falcon possesses is Falcon's Flight. This involves Falcon spreading his wings wide and soaring in an upwards spiral that will launch enemies backwards as it is being used. And since this attack does put you up in the air, it does open up the opportunity for using that falling aerial we mentioned a few minutes back to safely glide back down to ground, provide a little bit of covering fire, and recuperate a little bit of your energy point consumption. This attack has the melee attack type, the launch synergy trait, and is better on the overall damage front. So when you're trying to burn down large groups of the grunt type enemies, this is a very nice ability to use as it has that A classification for damage, and it remains consistent in having a C EP consumption as well as a C stagger. Falcon's third ability is the Razor Storm. This involves an array of bladed feathers being shot out from Falcon's wings. This attack can be used continuously by repeatedly pressing the button to use this ability, provided that you have the energy points to use it. It can also be aimed and directionally influenced to unleash the flurry of attacks. This has the energy attack type, which is interesting as they seem to be physical manifestations of attack items rather than energy or concussive blasts, but they do have the synergy trait Rapid Fire, which certainly makes sense due to the volley of feathers that are being sent cascading over the opponents that you are fighting against. The ability has a C class in the damage as well as a C in the EP consumption, but it is absolutely terrible on the stagger gauge front, only having an E classification. The last of Falcon's abilities is the Twisting Talon. This involves spreading the character's wings in a spinning forward dash rather than an upwards dash, which is seen with the Falcon's Flight. This ability can be charged up by holding the button, but when detonated in a team synergy format, it will detonate immediately and at a higher potency than holding into a charge or releasing before that full charge is done when using the ability on its own. This ability has the melee attack type, it has the charge synergy trait, and is Falcon's best overall damage dealer, receiving a B in the damage category, a C in the energy point consumption, and a whopping A in the amount of stagger damage that is dealt when this ability is used. And finally, we need to talk about Falcon's extreme ability. Now, this is a large area of effect that involves Red Wing as well as Falcon. There's a flurry of concussive blasts that happen out in a circular area in front of the character. Though one thing that is important to distinguish is although Falcon does not correct his location when using this, he will manipulate his orientation when using the attack. Therefore, if you aren't facing in a direction where there are enemies, he will autocorrect himself and turn towards the enemies that are nearby when releasing this attack. It takes just over 6 seconds to run its full course, and as you do so, it will be a decent damage dealer to burn down large groups of enemies, and if zoned correctly, can be fairly decent when trying to apply additional damage to boss type characters. But it's certainly a lot more reliable than a lot of the other extreme abilities that we've looked at up to this point. So with everything that we've looked at, this now begs the question, where in our tier list does Falcon belong? Well, I'll tell you right now, he's not a bad character. He has a lot of really good uses to him. But there are still a couple of members of this cast that edge him out in a couple of different categories, mainly the overall damage output reliability. But I do feel very confident in saying that he is much better than the last character that we looked at, and ranks higher than a lot of these other characters as well. As much as I love the other characters on this list, I just feel like Falcon has more damage output and overall versatility that he can bring to the table. So I think it's safe to say that Falcon fits very comfortably into the B tier, and he doesn't quite edge out Deadpool because of Deadpool's quirky methods of outputting damage, and in a lot of ways his superior range and abilities of conducting his combat. But he doesn't have very much of an edge over Falcon at the end of the day. They both sit very comfortably in this B tier, and I would wager, based off of what we've looked at so far and what I'm anticipating of our characters further on down the road, they sit towards the front end of that B tier, but only time will tell as we take a closer look at the different members of the cast. But what do you think? Do you think Falcon is better than I have analyzed? Do you feel like he belongs in a lower tier? Be sure to let me know in the comments down below what your thoughts are, and I will be looking forward to hearing your thoughts and feedback, as well as seeing you in next week's installment of Reviewed and Ranked. But don't forget, I do have videos of other subjects coming out between now and then, so make sure you stick around and view those videos as they come around also. So thanks again for watching, and I hope that you have an absolutely fantastic rest of your day.